To start off with, I welcome all the panelists to the session. Food safety, why is it important today? Well, the trend is changing. There's globalization and exposure to various cuisines, demands, and definitely also, the interest towards food. Food is beyond just meals. It is a very it's a social connect. We spend more than 4.5 hours in a day either cooking or eating or buying food, and it's very critical that it is given its due importance. And of course safety is very critical. Like I always say, no food is nutritious if it is not safe. So safety is very critical to food. And hygiene, definitely, this is a problem definitely connected to India. And it's something that needs attention, because we don't have skilled labor, especially today. I think there is a huge demand to train food handlers on the practices. You're giving them the best of the kitchens, the best of the equipments, but what is happening is the kind of trainings that they require to handle these kind of kitchens and these kind of equipments. The foodborne illnesses, water, which is very, very critical. As per the latest study, the reason being 2008, which is the latest in India, because we really don't have documented evidence on the kind of trend that we have in India, because there's no much of research which is being done in India. In fact, for my PhD, when I went out looking for data on food poisoning, I hardly got any information. I had to browse the net and pick up some newspapers and come up with some kind of an understanding of what kind of food poisoning, mass food poisoning that we see in India. And waterborne illness is the biggest issue that we see. Potable water which is not easily accessible, and in fact kitchens is one area where I see potable water not being available. As we go into the presentation, I have a few questions to the designers on water. The history of food safety has been recorded, where in Rome, the lead pipes which led to poisoning, post which the Irish potato famine, followed by the fungal disease. Louis Pasteur, who actually was the first person to come up with food preservation techniques, and of course today technology has brought in so much more. And Rachel Carson, who was the first person to actually have started research on DDT, which was largely used to kind of preserve crops. And of course today in India, one of the concerns is that we don't really have control over receiving. You may have the best kitchens, but when you test food, the way the water management, waste management happens, it gets into the vegetable farming, and ultimately when you test food, though you have taken every possible precaution, your food will still fail. For example, we're talking about Nestle, Maggie, containing lead, but if you pick up a milk sample today and test it, it would have the highest amount of lead. So I think this is definitely a concern on not just what we do from the receiving point, what we do in the kitchen, but also a step back where how it is being handled in the farms. This is a data which I collected, and this gives you an understanding of what kind of food poisoning we've seen in India, in the last year. And it's all schools, and then prison and government offices. So there's not much of data which is published otherwise. The challenges today that we see is the basic infrastructure. Till the kitchen is fine, but beyond which, So we have the regulatory bodies and various other organizations which actually play an important role here. So done is actually we have introduced a very interesting mechanism where we have brought in stainless steel water tanks, and at the outlet where the water is just moving into the pipes is where we have installed the UV, and we're actually testing it whether it works, and because cleaning is an important part. Kunal, this is a question to you, continuing with water. Water tanks, are normally not very easily accessible. It's somewhere on the rooftop where it's not very easy to actually reach. What kind of experience have you had, with cleaning of water tanks, and this is again from a design point, because my observation has been it's not very easy to get into the tank and clean them, or because it's on the rooftop, again it's not very kind of convenient for it.
So actually, how water systems work generally in hotels and all that, which I have seen, is that the treatment is not taking place at the stage where it is stored in the water tank. So what happens is that there is a water tank which receives water maybe from a municipal source or increasingly from tube wells in many places. There is no denying that municipal water supply is not available in many places, especially in Bangalore and Hyderabad and all. There is tanker water also loaded into that tank. That water is pumped up into a storage tank, from where it is fed into a softening plant. So the softened water is dosed with chlorine. Once it passes the softening plant and filtration and all that, and a separate part of that moves into an RO system. A lot of actually, the one which I am talking about, the RO membrane is actually chlorine tolerant. So that same chlorinated water is fed into the RO system, which makes it the RO water as well as the non-RO water to be potable. So interestingly, UV is not the solution to having safe water, because there is something called photoactivation of bacteria, which a UV system actually deactivates bacteria, does not kill them.
Right.
So once you have exposure to sunlight or exposure to light for a period of say a few hours, the bacteria is actually reactivated.
Right.
So unless you are reusing using the RO water immediately, it's not going to be guaranteed to be potable. On the other hand, chlorinated water is potable even when stored for long periods. So this is generally the approach to, see, the water tank cleaning happens on a cycle which can vary from establishment to establishment, but the guarantee of potable water comes from generally the chlorination. Second part is that even if you have let's say an RO system installed and your water is slightly turbid, the UV does not get to all the bacteria, and you have no guarantee of safe water after that. Second part, of course, is chlorinated water needs to be checked whether you're dosing chlorine in the correct quantity and all that. So that's generally how it works in practice, because having more than 547 rooms and couple of 800 odd guests in the hotel, if we have water which is not potable, we are going to hear about it very, very soon. So we can't take that risk.
Thank you so much for that. So this question is to Mr. Deepak. Have you had any instance where you have had food poisoning, and how have you reacted to it?
See, so food poisoning actually is a very highly abused word. Anybody, I'm not talking about only hospitals, even in hotels. First of all, you say alleged food poisoning, because there have been 90% of the complaints that come regarding food poisoning also happen, like people are still consuming the meal and they start feeling sick, which is not possible, because for a food poisoning will always happen with the bacterial, reaction. So you will require for any bacteria to cause any harm to a human body. The normal incubation period is 4 hours. So if somebody says that he had food poisoning while eating in a restaurant, it is impossible. So more or less, it could be due to the previous meal he had, and or at many times it could be a viral infection, not actually a food poisoning. Where food poisoning has to be bacteria related. So sorry. So if you ask me, in a hospital we have ever faced, see, and food poisoning, since we producing in bulk, it cannot be localized food poisoning. It will be having a major outbreak. In my current setup, I never faced any kind of problem, but yes, in previous hotel, in staff dining hall, we did experience once where we had an external vendor who was preparing. It was not produced for staff dining. We were not producing in the hotel. I was in hotel, as I said earlier. We had a salmonella outbreak. Basically, it was chicken noodles that were cooked, and we had at least around 50 to 60 of our employees who were impacted by that, and it took them 1 week to recover. So a normal bout of diarrhea is often mixed with food poisoning, basically, which might not be the case. You can have a diarrhea eating, say, somebody who is not used to eating spicy food, you can get a diarrhea. If you were out in heat for a long time, you can also have. So there are two terms which should not be mixed.
So if somebody comes to you and says, I had food poisoning,
So there's a protocol that you need to follow.
Right.
First of all, like as per HACCP, if you're following HACCP guidelines, you need to keep the food culture for lab testing. Our protocol is to keep for 4 days. Generally 3 to 4 days is the trend. So any alleged food poisoning allegation you have, you need to immediately send that food culture for the meal that the patient is or the guest is basically complaining about for lab testing. We have an internal microbiology lab in Medanta. We also do preventive checks. That's the thing. We also send the food for external lab testing as a backup mechanism. So first thing is, you definitely need to ascertain the cause, whether it's actually food related. Second, you need to take the stool sample of the patient or the affected person. And the stool sample should ascertain that it's a bacterial, growth, basically reaction that has caused to the illness. So these are the two main things. Without that, you cannot rule out whether it's food poisoning or not.
Thank you so much. So you basically track back the entire system, and in the past when you have done that, you've gone back and studied where you went wrong, and where did you go wrong?
As I said, in Medanta we never had.
No, the previous organization, because you had 60 of people.
There was
so what was was food not handled right? Was it the food handler, or was it not food being cooked to the right temperature? Or
temperature, salmonella is definitely it's not if the food. Eggs, it generally happens from poultry, eggs or chicken. Poultry is the most dangerous food. Meats are not. Poultry is very risky and food, so you need to cook it thoroughly. Right. So salmonella will not die till the time you cook it fully.
Thank you so much. And Kunal, adding to the water part, it's actually a very, very, a very interesting field, and it has a lot of information. But the fact is that chlorination does sanitize, and clean up the water. But right now, a lot of studies are showing that UV is a much better mechanism. What chlorination does is actually deactivates the microbes, and it is the same that ultraviolet radiation does. So it's actually changing. It is moving towards the ultraviolet radiation. Probably we could.
The latest technology which all of you should probably look at is ozonization.
Ozonization, right?
Which actually is, chlorine is not completely harmless, and it actually corrodes metal fittings and things like that. So ozone, on the other hand, added to water, is just decays into oxygen. So it's a much more powerful sanitation gas compared to, say, chlorine, which is, I'm not sure if there's any solutions available for this. Does anybody know?
No, we are doing this in one of the. I would come back to you because we're going through this trial at one of the biggest sites of Wipro, and we are studying this very closely. So we will have some solution. And the stainless steel tank is really working very well for us. And I think I would share more details on that once we have some concrete information. Moving on to the next point, which is the kind of maintenance. We had this issue where when I was doing one of my audits, I realized that the fire safety norms, the water was again not potable, and for fire you need potable water, but the connectivity wasn't around. So this maintenance, it's not just to do with the fire, but also other aspects like one of the cold walk-in coolers that we went to, which had never undergone a deep cleaning process. So it was like 7 years old, and when we actually opened and defrosted it and kind of went through the deep cleaning process, the stink was like unbearable. So I think maintenance is such an important part, and a lot of it gets ignored, especially in I'm sure Mr. Vora, if is around, will kind of is not around. So maintenance. How do you see maintenance? And what kind of precautionary measures do you put in, Mr. Rishi? Because you're investing expensive equipments. Are these people trained on it? Do we have a work instruction manual? And do you do a hand holding for some time? How do you look at apart from, of course, 5-star, otherwise, how do you see it? The maintenance part
Maintenance,
of it.
of course, undoubtedly is a very, very important factor. You may use all sorts of gadgets, but if you're not maintaining them properly, obviously they will not work to their optimum capacity. So, as you're mentioning about the cold room, it's not just the cold room; it's the entire gadget system of the equipments that are used in the hotels or restaurants. They all need maintenance. So cleaning, periodic cleaning, all these procedures are there.
So do you actually put in process saying that, okay, this is going to be your daily cleaning mechanism, and this would be like your deep cleaning mechanism? Is there something that you work on?
Absolutely.
Do you share a kind of a document?
There are procedures, daily cleaning, weekly cleaning, monthly cleaning, spring cleaning.
But do you give it as a handover when you give the project? Do you actually explain this to the... why I'm asking these things is because I see that there is a gap. There's a gap in, because when you walk in there and you ask them, they are blank. They really don't know. For example, something as basic as Bain Mari. They really don't know to what extent the water has to be, and when do they switch it on? Something as simple as that.
I really don't know where you've done these investigations.
No, I can actually show you data and these.
But by and large, in hotels and restaurants, there are separate departments which look after this aspect, and they are called kitchen stewarding. And these departments look after the hygiene aspects of the hotel.
But from your end, do you do hand over all these various important points that has to be the critical control points which need to be looked into?
Absolutely. Whatever equipment is being referred or going to be installed, the cleaning procedure, the safety procedure is all handed over. The proper documentation is handed over to the chief engineers, and they follow it. They have to, because safety and maintenance is a big factor in hotels.
So Kunal, moving from that point, do you think the kind of skill that people have today? I mean, in the industry, you've been there and you're kind of seeing the kind of. I mean, is there an attrition? How is it in the place that you work?
So cleaning is something.
It's not just cleaning. It could. Because it's again to do with the design, you put in all the effort, created the environment. Do you think there are skilled laborers to actually manage these kind of setups overall?
See, now this is addressed by the use of appropriate training and SOPs. So you generally have, like Mr. Rishi mentioned, there is a separate department for this. And the department is fairly well manned in the sense that there is a person who is in charge, who's like a manager, and then there are a number of team leaders. There's a proper hierarchy over there, and it is true that the people who are actually executing the job are not very skilled. But then the resources are there to guide them and to ensure that the results come out of that, because they are actually taking care of a very important asset. So not just the cleaning part and all that of those machines and all those Bain Marys and all the ovens and all that. Without that, those things will not work. I mean, and it has to literally be shining. So, for example, that shine, you know, the figure, the old story of somebody wearing white gloves and running the hands under the counter and all that. That's actually true, because so that is done by us. Because if we don't do it, the external auditor or the internal auditor will certainly do it. So you are right that there is attrition and that there are people who are leaving and they are not very skilled. That part is correct. But
probably the reason why hygiene probably at times is compromised, or safety at times is compromised, or maybe we are not getting the output that we are looking for, though we are probably equipped with everything that we need.
No, but see, this is something which is very. What you're saying is like, see, there in the 10% of organized food sector, there are like lakhs of establishments, and in some you have given a list of say 10 of them. So that failure rate is actually not that bad in the sense that the food safety record of the organized sector is, I would say, it's really amazing. I mean, people just don't fall sick. I mean, you eat everywhere on the road. You
High
eat pani puri,
resistance.
you eat chaat on the road, you eat dosa in a local diner, and you still keep going. So it's like something must be wrong. I mean,
Right, but
it's
but
like,
yes, yeah,
I think you are focusing too much on the five-star hotel or the big organization.
right.
The challenge is not there, because they have the entire wherewithal, they have the setup, they have the manpower, they have the SOP to everything. The real challenge is outside of the organized sector and I would not say outside of the organized sector, I would say outside of the big international chain or Indian brands or big hotels,
Right.
hospitals and all, where it is mandatory, because if hospitals, mess up on that, they'll be in too much big trouble. They'll be running free bills for every patient if they do that. So
That's right.
the real challenge is not there. The real challenges are elsewhere.
Right.
I think we
I
need
think,
to
yeah, the cafeterias and base kitchens and, the other institutional catering,
restaurants. If
hotels.
you visit most of the popular restaurants in the popular hubs of the metro cities, if you go to their back areas, you'll not go and eat there again.
Right. The more unhygienic, the more tastier is what a lot of people say.
And moreover, you see, again, there's a question of, peak times, high turnovers. Are
Right.
qualified people, qualified managers, qualified chefs?
Well, actually trying to understand the, food cart owners, why people don't fall ill when you eat out on the roads is, we were just trying to understand.
I would say Indians have a
Bangalore-
very high rate of tolerance to.
No, in fact, IIM Bangalore, did this study, and we realized that the food is cooked the same day, just 2 hours before service, and the entire food is used up. And because there is no technology there, there's nothing left over, and
that's not a very viable conclusion.
It's not viable. I'm just saying
It's not
it's
very-
on the lighter note that
that's not even scientific.
it's not definitely not scientific. Yeah.
See,
Kunal, I completely agree, but we can't ignore these various other food business operators who are operating, and we need to consider them, their challenges. Like right now we're working with the government and trying to understand if we can have water inlets, waste management techniques even for these people. Could we have secluded areas for them? And it needs designing, it does need attention. It may not be a 5-star, but a lot of people are dependent on that food, and we definitely can't ignore that sector.
No, you are right, absolutely. The thing is that I'm trying to shift the big bulk of the blame somewhere else. So, I mean, I think like Mr. Deepak mentioned about salmonella in chicken. So, this was recently the news that most of the ground beef sold in the US is contaminated with E. coli. I mean, who's aware of this? It's like, they are paranoid about food hygiene and the penalties are extremely high, but the US beef industry cannot produce beef without E. coli contamination.
You
It's
can
just not
actually see
possible.
this particular picture where I've actually taken into consideration how the
So
sewage
what
is actually handled.
my point is that you can't stop a plane from occasionally crashing.
Right.
That's the same way you take all due care in creating systems, designs, you create all kind of safeguards, you train people, but you can't prevent an outbreak of say a norovirus on a cruise ship.
Right.
The reason is that because it's an outbreak, you can't control Ebola with all the resources of the world trying to control that, confine that.
Right.
You can't do it.
See, the
So,
important point here, which I actually look at, is that if I know my strengths and weaknesses, I would work on my weaknesses and improve myself. So, definitely, when I am on a cruise or I am attending or I am cooking a particular menu which is sensitive, a potentially hazardous food, I am going to take into consideration every little aspect about it. So I think that is something which I think all of us consider when we are creating our HACCP. Moving on to Mr. Deepak, Swachh. Yeah, sorry, you had a question, right?
Basis all the data and information that you have, how many instances of record do you have of a food poisoning or a foodborne illness coming from a retail organized sector, be it the big hotels, be it the QSR, established QSR? Because listening to what you've been saying is that there is a high attrition in the industry we work, but there are very stringent things, measures, processes in place right from the design stage. Yes, kitchens are designed to be safe and operational friendly, but also we are very mindful of the fact that the industry we operate in has a very high attrition rate. So we have training departments, we have crew leaders who come in, check it, and make sure that the people who are coming in are trained properly, and then it is all documented, not just for sake of being documented, because we are very mindful that we are dealing with food and giving food out to customer, because any time a big chain has an instance in one particular restaurant, you have about 2,000 people going through that restaurant a day, and it will not go unnoticed. So basically,
Very right. The reputation is at stake, and there's a lot more than just that. But the problem here is that there is not enough data available. Nobody is ready to share data. Like I told you, when I started my review for my PhD, I realized that there is no data available. I went to the biggest hospitals in Bangalore and asked them if you have instances of food poisoning where you've made notes of, and they did not have anything to share, or probably they don't want to share. So these are aspects which will come out only when we as a forum come together, talk about the problems that we have and accordingly address whether we have a issue with skill development, or we have attrition because of which the trainings, or maybe the training frequency has to be higher. So I think the skill development part of it is something which I see as the way forward, especially in the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. Did I give you an answer? Because I have no data on.
I appreciate that, but as the panelists have said, I think the challenge is there, but the challenge lies outside the organized sector. And for 1 minute, I am not willing to accept the fact that on a street vendor, because the food is consumed within 2 hours, the water.
No, that is on the lighter note. Okay, that's on the lighter note. I kind of confirmed that to you. Coming back to Mr. Deepak again, what do you feel is a challenge? Why is hygiene such a big issue? Is technology the way forward? I mean, can we control hygiene through technology? What do you feel?
No, definitely technology does play a big role. Like nowadays you have all kind of, especially in hospitals, you have each and every vegetable that comes in, goes for cooking, it's sanitized before. Earlier it used to be done manually. You used to have this chlorine tablets, you used to dip it in for 10 minutes, and
Right,
you were sanitizing.
small time.
Now you have the vegetable sauna, so
Right.
you properly wash it, all dirt and everything is washed off, and then you put dosing of sanitizer in it. So technology does play a role. The challenges, as you said, to a certain extent, yes, the unskilled labor and high attrition does play
How
a big,
is it in your hospital? Is the attrition high?
pretty high.
So you
We
kind
don't
of have to continue training.
the training we have for us, since we have high volume to cater to, We have a dedicated training manager on site whose job is to train on daily basis all the staff. We have attrition up to 15% currently, and we
That's
also
quite
have
high.
we also have a health and safety manager on site. So his job is just to audit. See, apart from training, sensitizing, monitoring is the most important part for me. Because for us, we cannot risk, as somebody said in the audience, in healthcare, you cannot go wrong.
Right.
You know, the patients are already immunodeprived. One small, mistake could lead to, could be
major
fatal.
issues.
So for us, I think monitoring is the only way you can, basically control. With that, you can control all the gaps you could have due to attrition, due to lack of personal hygiene followed. So the kind of monitoring we have daily audits, not even regular. We have daily audits done by the health and safety manager. He goes, he checks randomly, basically the temperature logs. He checks the food supply, the storage. Our microbiology teams come and check take the food, your swabs, the hand swabs, if there's any kind of contamination. Basically, you have any E. coli, because E. coli generally comes from the hands. Basically.
Right. Hand washing procedures.
We do have hourly hand wash reminder. We have a bell, we have a PA system where we announce, go and wash your hand. And then it's monitored by the health and safety manager. So lots of protocols you have in place. In hotels, you would never see people, chefs working with a mask and gloves. For us, especially for the food that we prepare for the critically ill patients, like the RT feed, the feeds and blenderized diet, it's mandatory. You need to wear a cap, a mask, glove. You cannot enter the kitchen without that. So there are lots of checks in place, which you don't find in a normal, sector, hotel or restaurant sector.
Mr. Rishi, thank you so much, Deepak. And Mr. Rishi, when we talk about hand wash, continuing with this, is there any mandate on how many hand washes have to be there in any kitchen?
How many hand wash sinks?
Hand wash sinks.
Located.
Location?
Each kitchen to have one, receiving, garbage, everywhere hand wash.
In the operational area as well.
Yep.
Because this is one thing which I have noticed in most of the tuck shops. If you walk into any of the food courts, the food business operators, I see that there is one sink, which is an operational sink, which is also used as a hand wash, or maybe they don't wash their hands at all. So, and also in cafeterias where I see an issue, most of the IT sectors, institutional catering, where the cafeterias have no hand wash. And changing rooms. So whatever they have, the uniforms that they come in from the base kitchen, they just continue to work in the same clothing.
I agree there, and we do advise each time we are planning such kitchens that they must have staff facilities should be mandatory. As much as you have the kitchen as mandatory to cook food, staff facilities definitely should be there. Proper cafeterias for the staff to eat, toilets for them, change rooms, periodic tests,
hand
swabs. So all these are mandatory. Now, how much they followed depends on the training.
So do you actually go back and take a feedback, and have you kind of incorporated any hygiene procedures in your kitchen designing in the past? Is there anything that you did which really worked? Is there anything that you would like to share on the design front?
See, hygiene, it's more of hands-on actually.
Right.
It's to be practiced right there.
Personal hygiene?
Personal hygiene or otherwise, even equipment hygiene. When I was working for flight kitchens earlier, Oberoi, in those days, talking of 80s, eggs which used to come to the flight kitchen used to be washed because they can't go inside the kitchen.
Right, fecal
and
matter.
The eggs which used to come from the source used to have all those beads on it. So now we have machines which wash the eggs before they enter the kitchens. Not only in the kitchens, they come washed from the supplier. So technology, as you had talked about, is ongoing.
Right.
People are finding ways and means to receive good food, raw material, raw food, and at the same time train the staff for hygiene.
Yeah, in adding to this, at least in all the five-star kitchens, we have a very good mechanism. I'm sure in the hospital, more tastier is what a lot of people say.
And moreover, you see, again, there's a question of, peak times, high turnovers. Are
Right.
qualified people, qualified managers, qualified chefs?
Well, actually
No.
trying to understand the food cart owners, why people don't fall ill when you eat out on the roads is, we were just trying to understand.
I would say Indians have a
Bangalore.
very high rate of tolerance to.
No, in fact, IIM Bangalore, did this study, and we realized that yeah, the food is cooked the same day, just 2 hours before service, and the entire food is used up. And because there is no technology there, there's nothing left over, and
That's not a very viable conclusion.
it's not viable. I'm just saying
That's
it.
not
It's
very-
on the lighter note that
That's not even scientific.
it's not definitely not scientific. Yeah.
See,
Kunal, I completely agree, but we can't ignore these various other, food business operators who are operating, and we need to consider them, their challenges. Like right now, we're working with the government and trying to understand if we can have water inlets, waste management techniques, even for these people. Could we have
that's-
secluded areas for them? And it needs designing. It does need attention. It may not be a 5-star, but a lot of people are dependent on that food, and we definitely can't ignore that sector.
No, you are right, absolutely. The thing is that I'm trying to shift the big bulk of the blame somewhere else. So, I mean, I think like Mr. Deepak mentioned about salmonella in chicken. So, this was recently the news that most of the ground beef sold in the US is contaminated with E. coli. I mean, who's aware of this? It's like, they are paranoid about food hygiene and the penalties are extremely high, but the US beef industry cannot produce beef without E. coli contamination.
You
It's
can
just not
actually see
possible.
this particular, picture where I've actually taken into consideration how
So
the sewage
what
is
my
actually
point is,
handled.
my point is that you can't stop a plane from occasionally crashing.
Right.
That's the same way you take all due care in creating systems, designs, you create all kind of safeguards, you train people, but you can't prevent an outbreak of say a norovirus on a cruise ship.
Right.
The reason is that because it's an outbreak, you can't control Ebola with all the resources of the world trying to control that, confine that. You can't do it.
See, the important point here, which I actually look at, is that if I know my strengths and weaknesses, I would work on my weaknesses and improve myself. So definitely when I am on a cruise, or I am attending, or I am cooking a particular menu which is sensitive, a potentially hazardous food, I am going to take into consideration every little aspect about it. So I think that is something which I think all of us consider when we are creating our HACCP. Moving on to Mr. Deepak, Swachh. Yeah, sorry, you had a question, right?
Basis all the data and information that you have, how many instances of record do you have of a food poisoning or a foodborne illness coming from a retail organized sector, be it the big hotels, be it the QSR, established QSR? Because listening to what you've been saying is that there is a high attrition in the industry we work, but there are very stringent things, measures, processes in place right from the design stage. Yes, kitchens are designed to be safe and operational friendly, but also we are very mindful of the fact that the industry we operate in has a very high attrition rate. So we have training departments, we have crew leaders who come in, check it, and make sure that the people who are coming in are trained properly, and then it is all documented, not just for sake of being documented, because we are very mindful that we are dealing with food and giving food out to customer, because any time a big chain has an instance in one particular restaurant, you have about 2,000 people going through that restaurant a day, and it will not go unnoticed. So basically,
Very right, the reputation is at stake, and there's a lot more than just that. But the problem here is that there is not enough data available. Nobody is ready to share data. Like I told you, when I started my review for my PhD, I realized that there is no data available. I went to the biggest hospitals in Bangalore and asked them if you have instances of food poisoning where you've made notes of, and they did not have anything to share, or probably they don't want to share. So these are aspects which will come out only when we as a forum come together, talk about the problems that we have and accordingly address whether we have a issue with skill development, or we have attrition because of which the trainings, or maybe the training frequency has to be higher. So I think the skill development part of it is something which I see as the way forward, especially in the the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. Did I give you an answer? Because I have no data on.
I appreciate that, but as the panelists have said, I think the challenge is there, but the challenge lies outside the organized sector. And for 1 minute, I am not willing to accept the fact that on a street vendor, because the food is consumed within 2 hours, the water.
No, that is on the lighter note. Okay, that's on the lighter note. I kind of confirmed that to you. Coming back to Mr. Deepak again, what do you feel is a challenge? Why is hygiene such a big issue? Is technology the way forward? I mean, can we control hygiene through technology? What do you feel?
No, definitely technology does play a big role. Like nowadays you have all kind of, especially in hospitals, you have each and every vegetable that comes in, goes for cooking, it's sanitized before. Earlier it used to be done manually. You used to have this chlorine tablets, you used to dip it in for 10 minutes and you were sanitizing. Now you have the vegetable sauna. So you properly wash it, all dirt and everything is washed off, and then you put dosing of sanitizer in it. So technology does play a role. The challenges, as you said, to a certain extent, yes, the unskilled labor and high attrition does play
How is it in your hospital? Is the attrition high?
Pretty high.
So you kind of have to continue training?
The training we have for us, since we have high volume to cater to, we have a dedicated training manager on site whose job is to train on daily basis all the staff. We have attrition up to 15% currently, and we also have a health and safety manager on site. So his job is just to audit. See, apart from training, sensitizing, monitoring is the most important part for me. Because for us, we cannot risk, as somebody said in the audience, in healthcare, you cannot go wrong.
Right.
The patients are already immunodeprived. One small, mistake could lead to, could be
major
fatal. So for us, I think monitoring is the only way you can, control. With that you can control all the gaps you could have due to attrition, due to lack of personal hygiene followed. So the kind of monitoring we have daily audits, not even regular. We have daily audits done by the health and safety manager. He goes, he checks randomly, basically the temperature logs. He checks the food supply, the storage. Our microbiology teams come and take the food swabs, the hand swabs, if there's any kind of contamination. Basically, you have any E. coli, because E. coli generally comes from the hands.
Right. Hand washing procedures.
We do have hourly hand wash reminder. We have a bell, we have a PA system where we announce, go and wash your hand. And then it's monitored by the health and safety manager. So lots of protocols you have in place. In hotels, you would never see people, chefs, working with a mask and gloves. For us, especially for the food that we prepare for the critically ill patients, like the RT feed, the feeds and blenderized diet, it's mandatory. You need to wear a cap, a mask, glove. You cannot enter the kitchen without that. So there are lots of checks in place, which you don't find in a normal, sector, hotel or restaurant sector.
At health today, like I said, we have noticed that there's almost 1.5 times, insurance claims which are being made. And gradually, if we really don't take care of our health, we are going to be a sick nation. And diabetes and heart problems being number 1 today, cancer being number 3. Central obesity, which is a very common problem in India today. I think it's time that we give importance to our health, food being very, very critical. And I think eating out again being so common, wherein because of the double income, most people are dependent on at least a meal or a snack outside, and it is our responsibility to ensure that they get safe food. Follow-up modules, which is very important. I think it's critical that we have follow-ups. This forum is great, but beyond this, what? It's very important that we also have a follow-up on what were the issues that we have taken up, and is there some kind of a solution, like the roti making machine that we were talking about. I think it's so critical. A roti can actually break or make the meal, and we definitely need a solution there. So I think a follow-up is very critical. And what will work is, yes, all of us coming together as a community. I'm sure, even if the regulatory bodies don't react now, down the line, because this is big business, and I'm sure they will benefit from it equally. And of course, a behavioral change, something very, very difficult in India. I see a challenge because the last 10 years, it's been quite difficult, to explain to people the importance of safety and hygiene, and of course skill-based trainings. I think this can further be improved. In fact, right now I'm working on creating videos which can, help people see, a photographic memory of how to handle things. Maybe that is the solution, repetitions of it. So we'll have to arrive at it very scientifically, and of course a very structured approach. So at least if we're not looking at 100% change, can we even move, like say 0.1% towards safety, whether it's automation, whether it is behavioral change, anything for that matter. And of course, being very realistic, goals that we actually together can achieve. So with this, I end my session. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to the panelists for sharing your feedback. Yeah.
A lot what you said resonates with a lot of us. Probably not the hotels but it is a worry. Hygiene is a worry,
right,
both at the design level, with restaurants, with lower. Probably hotels have their own hygiene managers, but we don't have like a daily check. We do it like once a week or once in 15 days. So those are worries for a lot of us. What I wanted to understand is there any work that's being done, or are there equipments available on food preservation with ultraviolet, like cooked food?
Cooked food, ultraviolet radiation. See, normally, I'm not actually an expert there, but from whatever I have seen, which is very little, because technology is a totally, food technology is a different sector altogether. But what I have seen is radiation is used, but to what extent on a day-to-day basis is something, I'm not very sure of, but I can come back to you with the right information, because I very closely work with CFTRI, and I also have access to the other communities, which is the Dietetic Association and the clinical nutritionists. So I can come back to you with the right information.
You can also check with Kunal or Rajiv here if such a thing exists.
So the radiated food is something which, I don't know, there's a different law for that. Because
packaging is normally export.
Hello. See, radiation is currently being used for exports for certain spices and other things for it, but that's primarily for exports. I believe that there is a separate law which controls radiated food. On a regular basis, I don't think it is happening on a day-to-day basis.
See, ultraviolet does not work if it cannot penetrate the food. So even if you expose to ultraviolet, you can sterilize things like your oven, your room, or something like that, but you cannot preserve food, because ultraviolet has to penetrate and it cannot penetrate your food. And as far as radiation is concerned, like he mentioned, it requires a radioactive source which you cannot possess. I mean, you have to have special licenses for that. It requires, and that is real radiation, like atomic radiation.
Right,
So
irradiation is used. Irradiation is used, but it's more on the processing industry, which I have seen, not in the real life cooking kind of places. Here to add to this, what we have also done from our end is the last 3 years we have actually documented. We have we have created this platform, online platform, which helps us track the entire mechanism of food safety, because when you track, you actually are able to connect and see where you're going wrong and why you're going wrong. So this is something that I would like to share, where this is something created purely for the Indian setup, where we have sliced and diced the entire ISO requirement and the FSSAI requirement to whatever our best understanding is, and broken it down into various dimensions. As you can see, design and maintenance, location, pest control, equipment, facilities, waste disposal, receiving raw, and all these various categories. And what we have done here is, if this is a day-to-day, reporting and audit check that we are doing, you actually get to understand how many issues you have, what kind of issues you have, with a photographic evidence. So here you can actually see what is a non-compliance that you have, what is a corrective action that you need to take, and any specific comments that are being made regarding the non-compliance. It also gives you a count of how many times this particular issue has happened, and if the counts increase, it goes into the a major critical report, which is another view of the same report. Another report which I actually want to take you through is the normal reports that audits that we do. But again, maybe being a woman, my approach is very different, where I do not want to find faults, but I would like to encourage the team to actually make the corrective action, where we have kind of taken into consideration and made, for example, this particular kitchen. We had around 16 manholes in this particular kitchen, and I have no idea why so many manholes inside a kitchen. So every aspect is taken into consideration and details regarding those aspects, so that they're well educated about it. And when you want to actually track back and see how you've been performing, whether it's your equipments, whether it's to do with your design, maintenance, whether it's to do with personal hygiene, you're able to actually interpret and come up with a solution, an analysis of why you went wrong. So this is a solution that we have actually, in the last 3 years, we've been using this, and there is a good amount of data which has come in, because of which today I'm able to actually, the questions that I put to you was actually based on all these various evidence that we have collected, working with multiple different, food business operators. So any more questions?
So, with regards to preserving cooked food, I also wanted to ask that what are the best practices according to you to preserve cooked food?
Preserve good food. Cooked food.
Yeah.
See, it depends on what kind of food you're talking about. The moisture content plays a very important role, and the kind of course, like moisture it can actually decide on what is the shelf life of it. So we know for a fact that when you take up a menu or you pick up a dish, where do you want to preserve? Do you want to preserve at the receiving? Do you want to preserve it at the preparation, or do you want to preserve after you've cooked, partially cooked? So there is a shelf life to this entire the whole journey of food. So it all depends on what kind of a raw material you're picking up or cooked food you're picking up. It's completely based on that. So if you give me a particular dish, we would work it out and tell you, okay, this is the shelf life and this is the kind of temperature. Temperature is the best way to, kind of, temperature and moisture control is the best way to preserve.
I want to share something with you. You mentioned about going back to the regulatory authorities,
right,
for getting the right water. Now that we experienced that. We were involved in designing and setting up Athletes Village Kitchen for CWG, where the CWG, the Commonwealth Federation,
right,
required the water quality to be of WHO standards. And I understand that the Delhi Jal Board standards are similar, because
okay,
it's potable water. But when we checked with Delhi Jal Board, they said we will not be able to give you WHO quality. So we needed 48,000 liters of water, RO water every day, and which translated to 144,000 liters of total water. So, like including the rejected water. So now Delhi Jal Board told us that they would not be able to give that much of water, but they promised that they will give us stipulated quality of water, which would be as good as WHO quality, and they gave it in writing. And for 30 days, they supplied that kind of water through their lines.
Wonderful.
So they do have the design infrastructure, but they don't manage. So you're right, because when I went to Singapore first time many years ago, I wasn't used to buying bottles of water. So I called up the front desk and I asked for water. They said, you can drink. I said, I want to drink water from the tap. They said, okay, take it from the toilet. And it happened with other people also. So they said, I said, can I drink? Yes, you can drink. Now in India, we cannot drink water from the normal tap.
Right.
So there is a difference. Now the same thing happens with electricity. We all have our own inverters or gensets, and though we are supposed to get electricity, and we complain sometimes. But for water, you are the one who's raising the issue.
Right.
We have not been complaining, and there should be no need for us to buy RO units for home or aquaguards, because that is a law. They're supposed to give us good water.
Right.
So what you said is true. Like this should happen.
Right.
And all this actually should have happened before passing the Food Safety Act.
Right.
Because that act will shut down an outlet if they use bad water. So,
in fact, I created content, which the Brihad Bangalore Hotel Association have used, and they got a stay order on FSSAI for Karnataka. No other state got a stay order. So I have been very closely working with, various sectors in the food, business, and trying to make it as real as possible.
So, this is correct, and this happens not only just with water and electricity. We also encountered the same problem with drainage. We designed DoubleTree in Agra, and where in the end, the consultant there said that we cannot discharge water in the sewer lines because they do not have enough capacity to carry water, and the water will come back into the hotel.
Right.
So I don't know what measures were taken later on, but that was so there is a reason for going back to the
especially I see also a need, like it's not just water, but also the oil, the used oil which is thrown into, the sewage again, which causes a lot of issue, environment hazard as well. So, they expect, but there is no mechanism, to collect this used oil, where we are just left to struggle and find our own, mechanism to handle it or hand it over to an NGO, in which we are again not sure, whereas the wastage is quite large in the...
there are two things there. One, it is dumped. We don't know where. People charge money and take it away. And the second is that there is no regulation on grease traps.
Right.
So the grease traps which are available are like strainers. The grease which is collected is not from a hot source. The normal grease trap will use a slight temperature, so the grease remains molten and it flows into the container, disposal container. So now the grease which comes out is contaminated, has got solid, so it is not used for making soaps. If we had the right grease traps, then it would get sold and it would be recycled.
Right.
So that is not happening, but it's happening in countries where the law is very strict. They all do.
An important point which just came to my mind right now is pest. Pest issue is something very, very common. Mr. Rishi, is there something that you kind of, have faced where maybe, customers have come back and said maybe there's termite control or, for that matter, cockroach or any such thing where you probably have kind of...
To clarify, this is done by the operators themselves.
Operators. So you don't really you really don't come up and say that, okay, but you do place the cockroach traps and the others. So because I see a lot of times there's a lot of gaps, in the system where, there's an entry of, especially multi-tenanted, where maybe you are maintaining but somebody else is not. And this is a very common problem that we see that, rats are coming up and there's no mechanism to control it. And there's huge loss on that. So anybody else?
To your point on oil disposal, It could be a generic problem with a lot of small scale restaurants or places where they are uh, they are disposing their waste oil into drains, etc. But when it comes to organized sector, I believe they are, what my understanding is, they are very responsible generally about the oil disposal, up to an extent that that oil is being used for what purpose, they keep record of that. And it is like kind of like for our organization, if I say precisely, oil disposed to a vendor, but also we keep track on what exactly is doing out of that oil.
Right.
He should not be selling that oil back
Right, that's a concern.
to any other food service place. So, and that oil even should not go for any kind of a soap manufacturing or a cosmetic manufacturing, where it will be used by again humans in any form.
So this is very common,
So this
the oil.
will be used for generally for biodiesel or any other purpose, where it will be further consumed but not be reused for any other application.
Right. I think this is a very important area, and we've been trying to work on this. And I thought it, during your designing, if this is incorporated, I really don't know if I've been able to add to the design part of it. If there is any difference that my outlook to especially the area that you work in. But thank you so much for giving me time and opportunity to share, the pain points that I've had. And I think there's a lot of inputs that we have got from the panelists as well. Thank you so much, and a good evening to all of you.